Welcome to the InnoGuide Podcast, where we share the works of authors and mentors to guide innovation. In this episode, number 47, we'll be sharing Part 3 of The Empire of AI by Karen Hao. Chapter 13, The Two Prophets. Let's dive into a chapter that feels like a political thriller, a tech drama, and a philosophical debate all rolled into one. The Two Prophets takes us through the growing influence of OpenAI's CEO, Sam Altman, and co-founder Ilya Sutskever, their diverging visions for AI, and the mounting tensions within OpenAI's leadership. It's a story of power, persuasion, and the existential stakes of artificial intelligence. Altman's star in Washington. In May 2023, Sam Altman testified before Congress, and it was nothing short of a masterclass in political theater. Altman painted a glowing picture of AI's potential to cure cancer, solve climate change, and create fantastic new jobs. He definitely dodged thorny questions about copyright, transparency, and privacy while calling for regulation, on OpenAI's terms, of course. He even invoked the specter of China to urge lawmakers to let innovation flourish without too many restrictions. The senators were captivated. Altman's charm and sincerity won over even his critics, like Gary Marcus, who later admitted he'd likely been played. Altman's policy recommendations focused on regulating future AI risks rather than addressing current issues like labor and environmental impacts, shifted the conversation in his favor. He proposed creating a licensing regime for powerful AI models, setting safety standards for dangerous capabilities, and requiring independent audits. These ideas, while forward-looking, conveniently avoided holding OpenAI accountable for its existing practices. Behind the scenes, Altman and OpenAI's policy team had been working tirelessly to build relationships in Washington. By June, Altman had personally met with over 100 lawmakers, and his testimony was the culmination of months of lobbying. Meanwhile, a group of Hollywood artists struggling against the impact of generative AI on their livelihoods found themselves sidelined, literally walking the halls of Congress while Altman dined with lawmakers. It was a stark illustration of who held the power in the AI policy debate. The China card and the frontier model. Altman's narrative of AI regulation centered on the idea of frontier models that could pose existential risks. They quickly gained traction. The fear of China, already heightened by TikTok's rise in U.S. export control on AI chips, became a powerful tool to push this agenda. A white paper released in July 2023, co-authored by researchers from OpenAI, Microsoft, and Google DeepMind, proposed regulating AI models based on their compute thresholds. The term frontier models referred to the systems that might exhibit dangerous capabilities, like generating bioweapons or manipulating humans. The paper suggested a compute threshold of 10 to the 26 floating point operations, flops, as the point where regulation should kick in. While this number was somewhat arbitrary, it conveniently aligned with the compute used to train OpenAI's GPT-4. Critics like Sarah Hooker and Deborah Raji argued that compute alone was a poor predictor of risk, as advanced capabilities often depend more on training data and model design than sheer scale. Despite these concerns, the compute threshold approach gained momentum, influencing U.S. policy and even making its way into the Biden administration's AI executive order. The open versus closed debate. The push for regulating frontier models sparked a fierce debate between proponents of closed AI systems, like OpenAI and its allies, and advocates for open-source AI, like Meta and independent developers. The closed camp argued that restricting access to powerful models was necessary to prevent misuse, particularly by adversaries like China. The open camp countered that such restrictions would stifle innovation, entrench the dominance of tech giants, and make AI systems harder to scrutinize for ethical and environmental impacts. Meta, with its open-source Llama models, became a key player in this debate. While Llama wasn't fully open source, its release of model weights had empowered developers worldwide, including in China. This open collaboration, critics argued, had historically driven AI innovation and strengthened U.S. leadership in the field. Restricting access to AI models, they warned, could do more harm than good. Altman's world tour and OpenAI's growing divide. As Altman's influence grew, so did the internal tensions at OpenAI. In March 2023, Altman embarked on a whirlwind world tour, meeting with leaders across the globe to promote OpenAI's vision. The tour, while successful in raising OpenAI's profile, highlighted Altman's tendency to act independently of his team. This lack of coordination was becoming a recurring issue, with public messaging often muddled and strategic priorities unclear. Within OpenAI, the divide between the applied and safety divisions deepened. The applied team, focused on deploying AI products quickly, embraced the iterative deployment strategy, releasing models early to gather feedback and improve them. The safety team, led by figures like Jan Leke and Ilya Sutskever, grew increasingly alarmed by the potential risks of advanced AI. Sutskever, once a champion of advancing AI capabilities, had pivoted to focus on alignment and safety, co-leading a new initiative called Superalignment to prepare for the challenges of superintelligence. Sutskever's rhetoric took on a messianic tone with talk of bunkers and existential risks. His shift mirrored the growing influence of the doomer ideology within OpenAI, which viewed AGI as both a potential savior and a catastrophic threat. The Manhattan Project analogy, long used within OpenAI, took on new weight as the company grappled with the ethical and existential implications of its work. Governance challenges and board tensions. As OpenAI's ambitions grew, its governance structure came under strain. By late 2023, the board was in disarray, with 3 independent directors stepping down and no replacements in sight. Efforts to appoint new directors with AI safety expertise stalled, as Altman and other leaders resisted candidates outside their inner circle. Meanwhile, reports of Altman's opaque decision-making and conflicts of interest, such as his ownership of OpenAI's startup fund, raised concerns about his accountability. The board's struggles were compounded by Altman's tendency to downplay safety concerns and prioritize rapid deployment. For example, he failed to inform the board about a breach of safety protocols during GPT-4's rollout in India. These lapses, combined with Altman's resistance to oversight, left the independent directors increasingly frustrated and alarmed. The two prophets. At the heart of OpenAI's internal conflict were its two prophets: Altman, the charismatic CEO, pushing for rapid deployment and global influence, and Sutskever, the visionary scientist, torn between excitement and fear over AGI's potential. Their diverging priorities reflected the broader split within OpenAI, between those who saw AI as a tool to be deployed and those who viewed it as a force to be contained. As OpenAI prepared to train GPT-5 and develop autonomous AI agents like AI Scientist, the stakes couldn't have been higher. The company's rapid pace of innovation, combined with its internal divisions and governance challenges, created a volatile mix of ambition, fear, and uncertainty. Chapter ends with a tantalizing hint of what's to come, an email from Sutskever to board member Helen Toner, signaling that the tensions within OpenAI were about to reach a breaking point. This chapter highlights the high-stakes drama of OpenAI's rise, the ethical dilemmas of AI development, and the human dynamics shaping the future of technology. It's a story of power, persuasion, and the profound questions that come with creating machines that could one day surpass us. Chapter 14. Deliverance. Let me walk you through the deeply personal and complex story of Sam Altman and his sister Annie as it unfolded during a turbulent time in their lives. This chapter, Deliverance, is a raw and emotional exploration of family dynamics, personal struggles, and the intersection of private pain with public scrutiny. In the weeks leading up to a pivotal moment for OpenAI, Sam Altman found himself in the midst of a PR crisis. On September 25, 2023, a New York Magazine profile by Elizabeth Weil brought to light part of Sam's life that had long been kept out of the public eye, his estranged sister Annie. The article juxtaposed Sam's life of luxury, multi-million-dollar homes, and high-profile success with Annie's struggles, including severe health challenges, financial instability, and housing insecurity. For the first time, the mainstream press acknowledged Annie's existence, painting a stark contrast between the siblings' lives. The fallout of the article. Sam knew the article was coming. OpenAI's VP of Communications, Hannah Wong, had been tasked with managing the fallout, acting as a go-between for the magazine and the Altman family. On the eve of the article's release, during Yom Kippur, Sam sent Annie an email apologizing for not supporting her more during her struggles. He admitted he had been torn between family expectations and his own feelings, but ultimately acknowledged he had made the wrong call. The article's publication was a turning point. It not only exposed Annie's struggles, but also resurfaced old tweets in which she accused Sam of abuse. For Sam, this was a deeply painful and public airing of private family matters. For Annie, however, it was a release, a chance to finally be heard after years of feeling erased and ignored. Annie's story, a life unraveling. Annie's life had once been full of promise. She excelled academically, graduating from Tufts University with a degree in biopsychology and a minor in dance. She even pursued pre-med studies and worked in a neuroscience lab. But her life began to unravel due to a series of health challenges, including chronic pain, polycystic ovarian syndrome, PCOS, and other ailments. The death of her father in 2018, with whom she was closest, marked a devastating turning point. Her mental health spiraled and her relationship with her family deteriorated. Financial struggles compounded her challenges. After her father's death, Annie inherited some money but quickly depleted it on medical expenses, rent, and artistic pursuits. When she learned she wouldn't receive her father's 401k due to a family decision to defer it until she turned 59, she felt abandoned. Her family, including Sam, believed financial independence was the best way to help her, but Annie saw it as a lack of support during her most desperate times. By late 2019, Annie's financial situation was dire. She turned to sex work to make ends meet, a decision she described as a last resort. Despite occasional financial help from her family, including Sam covering her rent for a year, Annie felt the support came too late and with too many conditions. The chasm between her and her family grew wider, and by 2020 she had cut ties with them entirely. Allegations and legal battles. In late 2020 and early 2021, Annie began experiencing flashbacks of childhood sexual abuse, which she attributed to Sam. These memories, coupled with her ongoing struggles, led her to speak out publicly. In November 2021, she tweeted allegations of abuse against Sam and her brother Jack. Initially, her posts gained little traction, but as Sam's public profile rose with the success of OpenAI, her story began to attract attention. In January 2025, Annie filed a lawsuit against Sam, alleging sexual abuse during her childhood. The family vehemently denied the allegations, characterizing Annie as mentally unstable and accusing her of making unreasonable financial demands. The lawsuit sought damages of over $75,000 and became a focal point of Annie's efforts to reclaim her narrative. A complex portrait of Sam Altman. Annie's story complicates the public image of Sam Altman. To some, he is a visionary leader and a generous benefactor. To others, he is a calculating figure whose actions often serve his own interests. The contrast between his public persona and his private behavior, particularly in his relationship with Annie, raises questions about his moral character. Annie's experiences also challenge the grand promises of AI, which Sam and other OpenAI executives have touted as a solution to global problems like poverty and healthcare. Despite the advancements in AI, none of it alleviated Annie's struggles. In fact, the algorithms that govern social media and online platforms may have further marginalized her, limiting her ability to monetize her art and forcing her deeper into sex work. The broader implications. Annie's story is not just a family drama. It's a microcosm of the broader themes surrounding OpenAI and the tech industry. It highlights the power imbalances between individuals and corporations, the challenges of being heard in a world dominated by powerful narratives, and the human cost of technological progress. For Annie, the New York Magazine article and her subsequent lawsuit were steps toward reclaiming her voice. For Sam, they were a stark reminder of the personal and ethical complexities that come with being a public figure. And for the rest of us, their story serves as a poignant reflection on the intersection of personal pain, family dynamics, and the relentless march of technology. Chapter 15, The Gambit. Let me take you into the intricate web of power struggles, leadership challenges, and mounting tensions at OpenAI during a critical period. This chapter, The Gambit, is a deep dive into the dynamics of the company's leadership, the growing concerns about Sam Altman's behavior, and the quiet maneuvering of key players like Mira Murati and Ilya Sutskever to address what they saw as a growing crisis. Murati, a steady hand in chaos. The chapter begins with Mira Murati, OpenAI's chief technology officer, who had become a pivotal figure in the company. Born in Albania during a time of political and economic upheaval, Murati learned early how to navigate chaos with calm and precision. Her love for math and science propelled her to a scholarship in Canada, then to Dartmouth College, and eventually to high-profile roles at Tesla and Leap Motion before joining OpenAI in 2018. At OpenAI, Murati quickly rose through the ranks, becoming a trusted leader known for her problem-solving skills and ability to mediate conflicts. She was often the bridge between Sam Altman and the rest of the company, translating his vision into actionable plans and at times cleaning up the messes left in his wake. Despite her successes, she faced challenges, including sexism and skepticism from some colleagues who viewed her as an engineer rather than a scientist. Yet she remained a steady force, guiding the company through its most turbulent moments. Altman's leadership under scrutiny. As OpenAI CEO Sam Altman's leadership style was increasingly coming under fire, his tendency to agree with everyone to their face while bad-mouthing them behind their backs created confusion and mistrust. This behavior, coupled with his growing anxiety and erratic decision-making, was destabilizing the company. Altman's actions often left Murati and others scrambling to manage the fallout, whether it was smoothing over conflicts between teams or clarifying false promises he had made to key partners like Microsoft. One particularly glaring example was Altman's handling of a conflict between Ilya Sutskever, OpenAI's chief scientist, and Jacob Pachocki, a researcher leading the AI Scientist project. Altman had encouraged Pachocki's ambitions without informing Sutskever, creating a power struggle that led to months of organizational chaos. This pattern of behavior, pitting colleagues against each other and failing to provide clear direction, was eroding trust and morale within the company. Murati and Sutskever's growing concerns. Both Murati and Sutskever were deeply troubled by Altman's leadership. Murati, who had tried to give Altman constructive feedback in the past, found herself iced out for weeks afterwards. She began to see a pattern in his behavior. Anyone who challenged him risked being sidelined or undermined. Sutskever, meanwhile, was grappling with his own doubts about Altman's ability to lead OpenAI toward its ultimate goal of AGI, artificial general intelligence. He saw Altman's manipulative tendencies and lack of transparency as a direct threat to the company's mission. Their concerns came to a head in late 2023. Murati reached out to Helen Toner, an independent board member, to discuss the need for stronger governance at OpenAI. Around the same time, Sutskever, who had never before contacted Toner individually, also reached out. Both expressed worries about Altman's behavior and its impact on the company. Murati described the environment at OpenAI as toxic and unsustainable, while Sutskever went so far as to suggest that Altman might not be the right person to lead the company to AGI. The board's role in Altman's maneuvering. The independent board members, Toner, Adam D'Angelo, and Tasha McCauley, were beginning to piece together the extent of issues at OpenAI. Toner in particular became a confidant for both Murati and Sutskever, who shared their concerns about Altman's leadership. Sutskever even floated the idea of replacing Altman with Murati as interim CEO, a suggestion that underscored the gravity of the situation. Altman, however, was not oblivious to the growing scrutiny. He attempted to deflect attention by raising concerns about a research paper Toner had co-authored, which included mild critiques of OpenAI. He framed the paper as a potential reputational risk, but his real motive seemed to be an attempt to undermine Toner's credibility on the board. This backfired when Sutskever discovered that Altman had misrepresented Macaulay's stance on the issue, further highlighting his pattern of dishonesty. A leadership crisis in the making. By late October 2023, the cracks in OpenAI's leadership were becoming impossible to ignore. Murati and Sutskever were aligned in their belief that Altman's behavior was jeopardizing the company's mission. They saw his actions not just as a management issue, but a safety risk given the high stakes of AGI development. The board, too, was beginning to recognize the need for stronger oversight, though there was no consensus on how to proceed. This chapter ends with a sense of mounting tension. Sutskever, Murati, and the independent board members were all grappling with the same question: how to hold Altman accountable without destabilizing the company further. As the board prepared for its annual on-site meeting in November, the stage was set for a potential showdown. The bigger picture. The Gambit is a story of leadership under pressure, the complexities of managing a rapidly growing organization, and the ethical dilemmas inherent in developing transformative technologies. It paints a vivid picture of the challenges facing OpenAI as it navigates internal conflicts, external scrutiny, and the immense responsibility of shaping the future of AI. At its core, the chapter is a reminder that even the most visionary leaders are not immune to the pitfalls of power, and that the stakes are never higher than when the future of humanity is on the line. Chapter 16, Cloak and Dagger. Let me take you into the heart of OpenAI's most dramatic leadership crisis, a tale of intrigue, betrayal, and high-stakes decision-making. This chapter, Cloak and Dagger, captures the tense days leading up to and following the board's decision to remove Sam Altman as CEO, the fallout that ensued, and the power struggles that reshaped the company. The board's deliberations. By October 31st, 2023, the three independent board members, Helen Toner, Tasha McCauley, and Adam D'Angelo, were meeting daily to discuss the feedback they had received from senior leaders like Mira Murati and Ilya Sutskever. Both had raised serious concerns about Altman's leadership, with Sutskever even suggesting his removal. The board members were struck by the consistency of the feedback. At least 7 senior leaders had described Altman as manipulative, dishonest, and untrustworthy. These behaviors, they concluded, were not just typical CEO quirks, but serious issues that undermined OpenAI's mission, especially given the company's responsibility in developing AGI, Artificial General Intelligence. Murati had compared Altman to Elon Musk, noting that while Musk could justify his decisions, Altman often left his team guessing about his true intentions. Altman's tendency to scatter information, pit colleagues against each other, and avoid accountability created a toxic environment. Combined with Greg Brockman's chaotic influence, the leadership dynamic was unsustainable. The board questioned whether Altman, known for his startup prowess, was the right person to lead OpenAI as it matured into a global powerhouse. The decision to remove Altman. The board's deliberations were informed by dossiers compiled by Sutskever and Murati, which detailed Altman's patterns of saying different things to different people and bypassing processes, including attempts to skip safety reviews for GPT-4 Turbo. While there was no single damning piece of evidence, the accumulation of examples painted a troubling picture. The board also considered the potential fallout, how Microsoft, Brockman, and employees might react. Ultimately, they decided to act swiftly to prevent Altman from discovering their plans and derailing the process. On November 11th, the board finalized their decision to remove Altman and install Murati as interim CEO. Murati, though surprised, accepted the role, expressing confidence in her ability to lead. The board prepared to announce the decision publicly on November 17th. The fallout. The announcement triggered immediate chaos. While the initial response seemed calm, the situation quickly unraveled. Altman and Brockman framed the decision as a coup orchestrated by Sutskever, undermining the board's credibility. Employees, many of whom were loyal to Murati, began to question the board's actions. Key executives, including Brockman and several of his allies, resigned in protest, further destabilizing the company. Murati, who had initially supported the board's decision, began to waver. She felt the board had failed to justify their actions to the company, leaving her in an untenable position. By the weekend, she had aligned herself with the employees and leadership calling for Altman's return. Her name appeared first on an open letter signed by employees threatening to quit unless Altman was reinstated. Sutskever, too, began to crack under the pressure. While he stood by his concerns about Altman, he feared the company's collapse and ultimately added his name to the employee letter. The board's remaining allies were rapidly dwindling. The role of external forces. As the crisis unfolded, external players added fuel to the fire. Microsoft, initially supportive of the board, shifted its stance after reassurances from Altman's allies, including Reid Hoffman and Brian Chesky. By Sunday night, Microsoft announced that Altman and Brockman would lead a new AI research division, signaling their support for his return. Meanwhile, Elon Musk, a former OpenAI co-chair, stirred the pot on social media. He amplified conspiracy theories about the board's decision and shared a letter from former employees accusing Sam Altman of manipulation and deceit. The letter, which included links to articles critical of Altman, added to the frenzy, but ultimately failed to sway the outcome. The aftermath. By Monday morning, November 20th, the board conceded defeat. Murati and Sutskever had flipped sides, and the employee protest letter made it clear that the company could not function without Altman. The board negotiated Altman's return, focusing on preserving some mechanisms for accountability, including adding new independent directors and launching an investigation into Altman's leadership. The investigation, conducted by the law firm Wilmer Hale, reviewed thousands of documents and interviews, but ultimately concluded that Altman's behavior did not preclude him from leading the company. In March 2024, the new board, led by Brett Taylor and Larry Summers, issued a statement reaffirming their confidence in Altman and Brockman. 3 new independent directors were added, and the crisis appeared to be over. The lingering impact. Despite the resolution, the crisis left lasting scars. Employees referred to the episode as the blip, a brief but intense period of upheaval. OpenAI's secrecy and internal divisions deepened with projects like the Q algorithm, later renamed Strawberry, becoming even more siloed. Company's culture of trust and collaboration was severely tested, and the fallout from the crisis continued to shape its trajectory. In the end, Cloak and Dagger is a story of power, ambition, and the high stakes of leading a company at the forefront of transformative technology. It reveals the fragility of trust, the complexities of leadership, and the challenges of balancing innovation with accountability in the race toward AGI. Chapter 17, Reckoning. Let me take you through the aftermath of OpenAI's tumultuous leadership crisis, a period marked by internal fractures, public scrutiny, and a series of cascading controversies. This chapter, Reckoning, explores how the company grappled with the fallout of the blip, the departure of key figures, and the growing tension between its mission and its methods. The fallout of the blip. After the crisis, Ilya Sutskever, OpenAI's chief scientist, one of its co-founders, never returned to the office. His absence marked a significant blow to the company's safety clan, a group of employees deeply concerned about the existential risks of AI. By April 2024, following the conclusion of the board's investigation into Sam Altman, many of the most extreme doomers, those with high probabilities of AI-induced catastrophe, had either left the company or been fired for leaking information. The safety clan, once a vocal counterbalance to OpenAI's rapid development, was now a shadow of its former self. One of the final straws for the doomers was Altman's plan to create an AI chip company, a move they saw accelerating AI development and increasing existential risk. When confronted during an office hours session, Altman dismissed their concerns with a provocative question: how much would you be willing to delay a cure for cancer to avoid risks? Though he quickly walked back the comment, the damage was done. Several employees left soon after, disillusioned by what they saw as a disregard for safety. The rise of Scallion, GPT-4o. As the safety clan dwindled, the rest of OpenAI pressed forward with its ambitious vision. Company's latest model, Scallion, later renamed GPT-4o, was a multimodal system capable of processing language, vision, and audio. Unlike previous models, Scallion could directly interpret and respond to voice inputs, adding a new layer of human-like interaction. It could laugh, cough, and even deliver stand-up comedy routines, creating an uncanny sense of audio intelligence. The development of Scallion was a company-wide effort driven by competition with Google and Anthropic. OpenAI aimed to launch the model on May 9, 2024, just days before Google's annual I/O event. However, the aggressive timeline left little room for safety evaluations. A memo from a safety researcher warned that the rushed release process was grossly irresponsible, but Altman insisted on sticking to the schedule. Although the launch was ultimately delayed, the rush process highlighted the growing tension between OpenAI's safety commitments and its drive to outpace competitors. The Omni Crisis, a series of scandals. The period following the GPT-4o launch became known internally as the Omni Crisis, a cascade of controversies that shook the company to its core. 1. Sutskever's departure. On May 14th, OpenAI announced that Sutskever was officially leaving, with Jacob Pachocki stepping in as chief scientist. Sutskever's departure was a devastating loss for OpenAI, signaling a deeper rift within the company. Despite offers of extraordinary sums to stay, Sutskever declined, citing his inability to work under Altman and Brockman. His exit reignited questions about Altman's leadership and the company's commitment to safety. 2. Equity clawback scandal. On May 17th, Vox published a story revealing that OpenAI required departing employees to sign lifelong, non-disparagement agreements or risk losing their vested equity. This clawback clause shocked employees and the public alike. One former employee, Daniel Cocotalo, refused to sign the agreement, forfeiting $1.7 million in equity, 85% of his family's net worth. The revelation sparked outrage, with employees demanding answers during all-hands meetings. Altman initially denied knowledge of the clause, but later admitted it had been a long-standing issue, calling it the worst thing we've gotten wrong. 3. Scarlett Johansson controversy. On May 20th, Scarlett Johansson accused OpenAI of creating a voice for GPT-4o that closely resembled her own, despite her declining an earlier offer to voice ChatGPT. Johansson's statement, combined with Altman's dismissive response, fueled a public relations nightmare. OpenAI hastily removed the voice and issued an apology, but the damage to its reputation was done. Internal turmoil and public backlash. The Omni crisis exposed deep fractures within OpenAI. Employees were increasingly disillusioned by the company's handling of safety, equity, and public relations. Many felt that Altman's leadership was becoming a liability, with his repeated dishonesty and power-centralizing behavior undermining trust. The controversies also emboldened critics outside the company, including former employees and media outlets, to question OpenAI's ethics and accountability. Internally, the crises led to a growing sense of isolation. Executives urged employees to ignore external criticism and focus on the mission, but this only deepened the divide between OpenAI and the public. Some employees began to wonder if the board's decision to remove Altman during the blip had been justified after all. The failed attempt to bring back Sutskever. In a desperate bid to stabilize the company, Murati, Brockman, and Pochocki visited Sutskever at his home on May 23rd, bringing gifts and heartfelt pleas for him to return. Altman later joined, expressing his hope for a reconciliation. Sutskever, despite his grievances, seriously considered the offer, seeing it as a potential homecoming. However, internal politics quickly derailed the effort. Alexander Madry, a rising power within OpenAI, opposed Sutskever's return, fearing it would diminish his own influence. Within 24 hours, Brockman called Sutskever to inform him that the discussion was off the table. A moment for reflection, or not. The Omni crisis could have been an opportunity for OpenAI to reflect on its systemic issues, the concentration of power, the erosion of trust, and the growing disconnect between its mission and its action. Instead, the company chose to double down, framing the crises as inevitable challenges on the path to AGI. Altman urged employees to stay focused, emphasizing the need for stronger PR and closer ties with governments. But the cracks were undeniable. The departures of Sutskever, Leakey, and other key figures marked the beginning of a new phase in the boomer-doomer conflict, with disillusioned employees taking their fight outside the company. OpenAI's internal struggles, combined with mounting external criticism, left the company at a crossroads, grappling with the consequences of its own ambition. In the end, Reckoning is a story of a company at war with itself, torn between its lofty mission and the realities of power politics and public perception. It's a cautionary tale about the cost of ambition and the fragility of trust in the race to shape the future of AI. Chapter 18, A Formula for Empire. Let's dive into the fascinating and turbulent story of how OpenAI, under Sam Altman's leadership, evolved from a nonprofit, idealist venture into what can only be described as an empire of AI. This chapter, A Formula for Empire, unpacks the strategies, contradictions, and power plays that have defined OpenAI's rise and the cracks that have begun to show. Altman's inspiration, Napoleon's Playbook. Sam Altman once shared that one of the most impactful books he read in 2018 was The Mind of Napoleon, a collection of quotes from the French military leader who seized power, declared himself emperor, and sought to dominate Europe. Altman admired Napoleon's deep understanding of human psychology and his ability to reinterpret ideals like the French Revolution's motto of liberté, égalité, fraternité to consolidate power. Napoleon's ability to twist lofty ideals into tools for control left a lasting impression on Altman, who reflected, "That is a dude who understands something deep that I did not." Fast forward to OpenAI's journey, and it's hard not to see parallels. What began as a mission to ensure AGI, artificial general intelligence, benefits all of humanity has morphed into a potent formula for centralizing talent, capital, and power. Altman's approach, like Napoleon's, has been to reinterpret and adapt the mission to suit the moment, often in ways that consolidate control. The three ingredients of OpenAI's empire. Altman's formula for building OpenAI's empire rests on three key ingredients. 1. A grand mission to rally talent. OpenAI's mission has always been ambitious, bordering on religious. Altman once wrote that the best founders don't just create companies, they create movements. OpenAI's mission to benefit humanity has attracted some of the brightest minds in AI, uniting them under a shared vision of building AGI. 2. Centralizing capital and resources. OpenAI has positioned itself as the defender of democratic AI, warning against authoritarian competitors. This narrative has helped it secure massive funding and eliminate regulatory roadblocks. In a 2024 op-ed, Altman framed the stakes as a battle between democratic and authoritarian AI, rallying support for OpenAI as the good guys. And 3, a vague and adaptable mission. Perhaps the most powerful ingredient is the mission's vagueness. What does benefiting humanity mean? What even is AGI? Altman himself admitted to the New York Times that AGI is a ridiculous and meaningless term. This flexibility has allowed OpenAI to reinterpret its mission repeatedly from its nonprofit origins to its current for-profit ambitions. The evolution of OpenAI's mission. OpenAI's mission has undergone a remarkable transformation over the years. 2015, a nonprofit committed to open sourcing research. 2018 and 2019, a capped profit structure to attract resources while avoiding reckless competition. 2020, a shift to closed models and APIs for benefit sharing. 2022, a race to deploy ChatGPT as quickly as possible. 2024, a focus on putting capable AI tools in the hands of people for free or at a great price. By 2024, Altman was already rewriting the mission again, emphasizing the need for tighter control, global lobbying, and aggressive commercialization. OpenAI's partnership with Microsoft was renegotiated to ensure continued collaboration, and Altman hinted that the concept of AGI would no longer have a clear cutoff point. It would be a continual thing. The Omni crisis fallout and leadership restructuring. The aftermath of the Omni crisis revealed deep fractures within OpenAI. The departures of key figures like Ilya Sutskever and Jan Leike marked the beginning of a talent exodus. By mid-2024, OpenAI was hemorrhaging senior staff, including Mira Murati, CTO, John Schulman, alignment lead, and Bob McGrew, chief research officer. These exits were framed as amicable. They underscored glowing frustrations with Altman's leadership and the company's direction. Internally, Altman began consolidating power. The nonprofit board, which had the authority to fire him, was seen as a liability. By May 2024, employees noticed changes in shareholder agreements that hinted at plans to dissolve the nonprofit's control. Reports soon confirmed that Altman was exploring a transition to a for-profit structure, either as a traditional corporation or as a public benefit corporation. This restructuring would strip the nonprofit board of its power, aligning OpenAI more closely with investor interests. Public pressure and mounting criticism. As OpenAI moved toward a more corporate structure, public criticism intensified. Former employees like Daniel Kokotallo launched campaigns calling for greater transparency and whistleblower protections. The SEC received complaints alleging that OpenAI's exit agreements violated federal whistleblower laws. Meanwhile, 5 U.S. senators sent a letter to Altman demanding clarity on allegations of safety lapses and employee suppression. The leadership turmoil and public scrutiny only added to OpenAI's challenges. Competitors like Anthropic and xAI were gaining ground, while OpenAI's latest model, Orion, faced delays. The company's reliance on scaling existing research was no longer enough. It needed new breakthroughs, but years of focusing on exploitation over exploration had left it ill-prepared. The empire consolidates. Despite the chaos, OpenAI continued to raise staggering amounts of capital. In October 24, it closed a $6.6 billion funding round, the largest in VC history, valuing the company at $157 billion. The deal came with a catch. Investors could demand their money back if OpenAI didn't convert into a for-profit within 2 years. By the end of the year, OpenAI announced its transition to a public benefit corporation with the nonprofit retaining a minority stake. Altman's vision for OpenAI as an empire of AI was becoming clearer. In January 2025, he declared that OpenAI was confident in its ability to build AGI and was now aiming for superintelligence. The company's mission, once rooted in altruism, had become a vehicle for entrenching dominance. The cost of empire. The chapter closes with a sobering reflection on the cost of OpenAI's rise. The company's relentless pursuit of power and control has alienated employees, attracted regulatory scrutiny, and sparked public backlash. Yet, for Altman, these challenges are just the price of building an empire. As he told employees during the Omni crisis, the level of stress and tension will keep increasing. The best way to manage it is to double down on our PR, entrench our relationships with governments, and hold steadfast to our convictions. In the end, OpenAI's story is one of ambition, reinvention, and the uneasy balance between idealism and power. It's a modern-day empire built on a foundation of lofty promises and relentless pragmatism, with Sam Altman at its helm. Whether it will truly benefit humanity remains an open question. And that's where we'll leave it. I think this is a great book. Feel free to pick up a copy. It's called Empire of AI by Karen Hao. Thanks for joining. That's a wrap.